How's it? I'm Honan,
I'm Oliver.
and today is episode 5 of the Kpop Podcast. We are already on episode 5,
Yeah,
and
flying
somehow
through.
we haven't been canceled yet. So the first topic that we have today for you guys is English versions versus kind of original English songs. That's like a general idea of the topic, but we're probably going to expand more onto that. And right away, just the very first thing I want to say about this topic is Red Velvet's Bad Boy is the most disappointing English version I've ever experienced in my life. And it's not because overall it's not bad, but how do you get rid of that opening line and that was already so perfect and worked already so well in English and change it to who that is? Like I still never understand that one for the rest of my life.
I guess that's a pretty good thing to start off with, right? Because it's like, obviously, changing a song into English is like, it's not just like they never just sing a translated version of the original lyrics, right?
Yeah.
Like they actively change the whole song and change the meaning and stuff. And then that naturally leads to different words and therefore different sounds and stuff. So it can be kind of unsettling because the rhyming is different. But it does always make it especially weird when you have an English lyric in the original Korean version of the song that they then change to a different English lyric to make it more fitting to that lyrical content.
Especially something that to me is like the iconic like opening, like who that boy, like that was like the perfect opening, and the excitement of like first hearing that English version come on and then just instant downer from like the
for a song literally called Bad Boy as well. Like, talk about the boy. Yeah. I mean, I think even Red Velvet themselves don't like it because I remember, I don't know if you've seen this. I think they performed it at KCON, like KCON New York.
Yeah, KCON New York, I believe it was, or something.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Where
clip.
they start with the Korean version and then they do the English version, where the latter half of the English version has like those cool lyrics like that "I'll make you fall to your knees" bit, which I really like.
Yeah.
So maybe they were like, yeah, I'm not starting off like that, but we'll half and half it, and it ends up being
well, because Wendy is fluent in English, obviously.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder if she was there and was just like, excuse me, but like this is like not as cool like in English like than what we already had in place. Like,
obviously if groups aren't songwriters themselves, then it's gonna be less of a factor. But you do think if there's an English speaking member and they get given an English version of a song and the lyrics are like nonsensical or like really cringy, that they'd be just kind of going, like, really? And like, why do they have no say in being able to choose like better lyrics or something for it?
Yeah.
Maybe they just don't care or they don't feel comfortable or whatever, which is fine.
Well, she might have heard it and cringed and just been like, oh, well, okay. Like,
at least it's not my part. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, and stuff like that does kind of put you off a lot of English versions. I guess because, like, mention the kind of the history of English versions of K-pop songs, because it's not by any means a new phenomenon like you might think. It's not just since K-pop has been big in the West, there's been more English versions. It's much more broad than that. So I'm probably wrong, but at least the most memorable earlier English version of a K-pop song is "Nobody." By Wonder Girls. Yeah, because that had like an English version that was like what was it led with basically going into their tour in America, and it was pretty good. Like nobody like that worked well, and it that was one of those ones where I was so used to the English version, it was weird to hear the Korean version. So it could definitely work, right? But then you have like an equivalent, which was the English version of The Boys by Girls' Generation, which they tried to promote with in the US.
Wait, that's a thing?
Yeah.
I feel like I've only ever heard the Korean version of it. Or maybe have I heard the English? I need to hear that right now.
Yeah, it's it doesn't work as well as, let's say, it's been a while since I've listened to it as well. But yeah, so some songs don't suit English anywhere nearly as well, I think, and obviously that can depend on the lyrical choices and stuff. But some of them work unexpectedly well, and I think what can be a nice thing when they have an English version is sometimes they actually change the song structure as a whole. Maybe not as a whole, but they make a change to it. So I don't know if you've heard I think you have heard the English version of Cool by Ricky Mickey.
Yes, I have.
Mm-hmm. So they add, so normally in that song, right, you have its chorus, we have the, you know, pre-chorus, chorus, and then they have that post-chorus bit. And then in the second chorus, it goes straight into the bridge rather than having the post-chorus bit again. But in the English version, they have that post-chorus bit again, which I think works a lot better, because I like hearing that, the way that chorus kind of escalates into its post-chorus bit.
That I feel like that could be also just because they revisited the song and then thought to themselves, whoever is in charge of that process was like, oh, actually this is interesting if we do this when you revisit a song, because that can happen, like when I've revisited something that's older and then you realize, oh, this would have been cool, and then maybe they do that even before they were thinking about it as the English version, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's possible. I mean, those I'm pretty sure were just recorded at the same time because they were both released on the same album.
Oh, well then they should have heard the English version and been like, that's cool. We should do that with the...
No pun intended. But maybe it was that the songwriters were like, they weren't sure which one they liked more, so they ended up just kind of saying, okay, we'll do the longer version as the English version and we'll just have the cut version as the Korean version. And now that way we get to release both of them. Maybe it was a heated argument over whether or not to include that second post-chorus or not. But like, I think that's an example of an English version that works really well, because that the whole song is just like being cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the English version is about just having a party, and it doesn't have any substance to it at all, and all the lyrics don't make any sense. But just by the nature of the song itself, it works. Whereas other versions, English versions of songs, tend to not quite.
I remember thinking the English version of that was good to listen to. It's important how it rolls, you know, like the rhyme and sound of it. I think what happens with some of the English versions is the rhyme and roll of like how they're singing in English doesn't always translate over well.
Yeah,
like Loona like did really good job with that as well, like the actually sounding like it had a good rhyme and roll to it. Yeah, Star.
Yeah, Star is a fantastic example. And there's plenty of good examples. Obviously, and I the thing is, I think with Korean, for me, has such a natural cadence to it that suits a lot of singing styles and rapping styles that can feel awkward in English. So if the song is built around a particular style of flow or something that Korean is perfectly suited to, and then they try and force that same thing with English, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, imagine Gotta Sade by like BY in English.
Right.
Like, yeah. There's something about like the tone of like the way he raps like in Korean, and especially the really quick fire part of it. Like I couldn't imagine it in English. Like I'm trying, like you listen to it, it's so catchy, the rhyme of the Korean tone in that song, like da 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 be what Gotta Sade, like it's perfect. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, well that song is fundamentally a Korean song, right? Like you couldn't have a title like Gotta Sade without it. Yeah. I obviously the choice of lyrics is a big thing, and I think with certain songs which have a beat that suits a vibe that doesn't have to be too serious and you can do some fun kind of lyrics, it's better. So like for Regular by NCT, for example, you can have a lyric like I be walking with the cheese, that's the queso. And it's like, because just of the natural swagger of the song, it fits and it kind of works, right? So that's another example of missing out on a great English lyric from the Korean original song, because like there's that line in the rap that Mark has where it's like, it's like Kanye, can we touch the sky? And it was just a nice little reference, right? And then that's just not in the in the rap in the English version, and I'm like, why?
But yeah, because they totally could have, translated it and done it that way.
Yeah, but those kinds of ones fit, whereas sometimes it feels like the lyrics are kind of stuck. They just kind of like lyrics end up getting thrown in that are cheesy and don't work. So like an example I'm thinking of is Stray Kids Double Knots, I think, English version.
I'm not sure that I've actually heard that one.
It just, that song is all about like just a bit. That's like an EDM song. Where
I know the song. Right? I don't know that I've done the English version.
Right. Well, that's kind of the point. I think for us as Western listeners, the lyrics to that song were never important because it's like an instrumental chorus and everything, right? And then when you have them just going tied in a double knot over the top of it, it just kind of, it's like it kind of just takes away from the like visceral enjoyment of it.
Yeah. There's definitely phrases like that where they sound cool in Korean, the way they rhyme, the way they like roll off the tongue. Mm-hmm. And then when you hear it in English, you're like, oh no, like, but the way it sounds in Korean sounds cool. And then in English, it's like, dude, that doesn't sound cool in English. Like,
yeah. And obviously there's some words which like can't or shouldn't be translated, and it would be awful if they ever were. Like Goddessy David said, like if Stray Kids did an English version of Sori Kun, they'd be like twat twat twat, traditional Korean singing sound. Like, it would be like, it'd be awful. Right? Like you just couldn't do it.
I kind of want to see a joke version now, just if they could fit it all in there, just
yeah. So it's yeah, but then on the other hand, we have the English original songs, which can also be great and can also not be so great. And I think that's the thing that more recently the overall quality has started increasing significantly for the most part.
Yeah, I think BTS does quite a bit of English releases now, huh?
Yeah, well, the last few things they've released have been English.
And obviously twice the Feels happened, and I thought that was a really well done English version because that retained the sound of Twice like perfectly in English, which I thought was actually really not an easy thing to do, like because Twice has such a particular style, I would say, that fits so well in the Korean language. I was like, okay, how do you translate that to English like perfectly? And I felt like they really kind of did that. Like the Feels whole vibe maintained that. Okay, this is Twice. Like while you're listening to it.
And I think this is why we're keeping this as an English topic separate from just like an in other languages topic, because obviously we have Japanese language releases as a whole thing, which is different because it's often deliberate to change the vibe for those songs a lot of the time to appeal more to that market. Whereas I think it's great when a K-pop artist can release a song that is distinctly of their color, like the Feels was, without having to try and make it overly palatable to the Western market, which I feel like is a big criticism of some of BTS's songs. I don't necessarily think that that's fully justified. I don't listen to enough Western pop to know, but I wouldn't have thought that something like Butter would be something that would be dropped by a Western pop act.
And Dynamite either. Dynamite is done still in a very boy group kind of style, which I don't think is something you really get in Western pop music anymore.
Yeah, like you could see someone like Bruno Mars.
Yeah, Bruno Mars like for sure. Like, but that's like it that I can think of.
It's definitely not like a big thing.
Yeah.
And then Permission to Dance was just kind of like a watered down version of that. But I mean, it was never a title release anyway, so it is what it is. What was I going to say? Yes, I think we're going to see a lot more of it, and I think we're seeing even just like releases that are in English, that aren't even just like this is a special English release. It just kind of is. So like Chungha, for example, she did her want you, I want, yeah, that like that's all in English. And I don't think anyone really thought like, wow, this is an English song from Chungha, but it is.
I think it helps because she's super fluent as well, right? Because she was from Texas or something like that, right? It's something like that. I think she just has an English speaking background or whatever somehow.
Yeah.
So like I think that helps a lot when you do hear an English version from someone who's really well pronounced. Yeah, like that, and then they have a real grasp of like what works and doesn't in the language when
and knowing exactly what they're saying and knowing the kinds of inflections and things you can put on the words to make the meaning more like make it feel especially for a song like that, it's like she knows what she's doing. Certainly with that kind of song.
What do you think of like the Blackpink ones?
So what were the Blackpink English language songs we had? We had the one with Cardi B, right?
Yeah, so the album, it's just called the album, I believe, right? Yeah. Blackpink the album. So it had it had Ice Cream, with Selena Gomez, and there's a song on there. I don't know why I'm blanking on the name of it. I can pull it up. It takes me 2 seconds.
Was Crazy Over You in English?
Yes. Think I'm crazy, oh you. Yeah, that might be the one I'm thinking of as well. But so I have Blackpink open, and if I go to the album, which is right here, so Ice Cream, the song Cardi B, they also did the thing with Lady Gaga, and then
that's them featuring, so that's probably not quite the same.
Yeah. Crazy Over You, I do believe, and Love to Hate Me, I believe might also
Love to Hate Me, right?
So I actually, the thing about their English versions is another case of like, Jenny and Rose obviously are fluent, and then Lisa has always appeared to have a really good grasp of English as well. So the pronunciation, when it's so good, from all the members like that, it comes across like authentic feeling, I think, versus where there's might be like a little bit of weird pronunciation throughout the whole song or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean that's an aside, I guess, but for me, I loved when Blackpink were doing features and they were in Korean as well, because like Sour Candy, the one with Lady Gaga, for example, there is Korean in there. It's not all English. The one they did with Dua Lipa, Kiss and Make Up, which I was a fan of, that they do is partly in Korean as well. And I I end up liking that more than when they're fully in English. I think Blackpink, because as you said, they're naturally very good. Well, not naturally, they are very good speakers of English to native or near native levels. And the way that their music is and the way they've been trained and stuff, they're very good at delivering, especially rap in English, in ways that a lot of other K-pop artists aren't. Like it would come up, like I feel like there aren't many rappers in the industry that could do a song like Money.
And, like Lisa's,
right. And even though I don't like the song, I think it's something that Lisa is one of the only people who could do it.
For
right?
Sure.
That was a terribly grammatically created sentence. But so I think it's hard for me because I didn't like a lot of those. I didn't like a lot of the songs on the album, and the songs I liked most tended to be the ones that had more Korean aspects to them. But I mean, like I said, I wasn't a big fan of much of it.
I do prefer, like you're saying, when it's mixed really well. Like, there's the Korean in there, and then they throw just like a zinger of a like English line or something, in the rap or something, and it just hits hard because of the way they threw it in.
Yeah, so one of my favorite Blackpink songs, for example, is Really, which has 2 rap verses by Lisa in it, both of which are fully in English. and the hook is in English, but there is Korean singing in the verses otherwise. Yeah. And it's like when those rap verses come in, it hits really hard, like, and it fits it perfectly, and the beat changes appropriately to accommodate it and everything. And it's like, it feels more well constructed. Whereas I felt like, this is more of a critique of the album now, that I felt like a lot of those songs were like, they were like, it was as if a cover artist was trying to make a Blackpink song rather than something organic.
I felt I did like the album did grow on me because the song's like pretty savage and things like that. But at first I definitely was just like, oh, I preferred before, you know, like right away when I was listening to it, like when like the release that had Hit You With That Do, and it had Forever Young.
Yep.
And like See You Later and things like that.
And
like,
really,
yeah, I like that all together is so good to listen to. Like,
yeah, that was a great package. Yeah, for sure.
Forever Young is another great example of one that mixes Korean and English really good. Like the start of it, obviously the in Korean, but then the chorus is Forever Young. Like it's working perfect.
Well, I mean, usually the hook of a K-pop song is almost always centered around an English phrase, right? So that's kind of standard, but it's like how well that the rest of it is delivered. So like parts of Jennie's rap verse, for example, and then like the like we go bum 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 like dance break thing at the end, or like dance outro. Yeah, right. Like it's and that because it's a party song and it fits that vibe, and I think that's when an English lyric is matching its vibe, the vibe of the song, then it's good. And it's hard not to be good. It's easier when it's that type of song.
Just to expand a little bit on an old topic, I'm not going to go deep into it or anything, but when we talked about like accessible K-pop, and I had a large group of people hadn't seen in a while that I was the designated driver for, and they were inebriated, let's say. They were drinking for quite a while, so a lot of them don't know K-pop, and I just blasted like Blackpink while I was driving, and they were losing their shit. They were having like the most fun time, just like losing it to Boombaya and stuff, like, right. You know, like, so it is one of those groups because I think their music's so fun, especially some of those like earlier club style like songs like that, where everyone just right when even if they don't know the language, you're just like, this is sick, like hearing Boombaya and everything go off. Like,
I guess that's part of the reason of my criticism is that I don't feel like those songs like Love to Hate Me and Crazy Over You or whatever had that much added to them by virtue of them being in English. Like the lyrical content that I was listening to, obviously, like I'm never one to go and look up K-pop lyrics and stuff. And it's like my Korean is good enough that I can understand, depending on the song, anywhere from like a fifth to a third of it just by catching bits of it, right? Usually because the song, they're never that complex. They're never talking about, apart from BY, a lot of them aren't necessarily talking about like really deep shit. It's just, love and the same kind of stuff that a lot of English songs are about. So I can pick up on it. And then when it's in English, it's like, I can't not understand what is being said to me. And I'm like, I don't feel like, if anything, this is part of the reason why I stopped listening to Western music in general, was because I didn't want to listen to the lyrics.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hear what moany rubbish they were saying. I wanted to just enjoy the sound of it. And it was easier when I didn't understand what that was. And so, I just don't feel like it necessarily adds anything to being in English. But it absolutely can. And it's not just party songs that work well in English regardless or whatever, because we have an example, artists of like Yerin Beck, for example. Her last two albums have been fully in English, unless you include the remake album that she just did. Because in her words, she feels like she expresses herself better in English, or she prefers to say what she wants to say. And obviously this is her writing all of her own songs and stuff. she feels like it just comes out better in English, and there's stuff that she can't say in Korean as well, probably all the swear words. So it's like you absolutely can do it, and I think part of the charm of that is, especially in from the songs from Every Letter I Sent You, it's like the English isn't perfect. Like there are grammatical mistakes and some phrases in there that don't quite make sense, but that's part of the charm in a way. And like when you were saying about how Rose and Jenny and Lisa have such good pronunciation, it's like sometimes I love hearing K-pop artists sing in English because their pronunciation isn't perfect.
Got you.
And it adds to the charm of it in a way. Like listening to Sohee from Nature, go check out Kim Sohee is on YouTube for her song covers. Like, so she did a song cover of Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo, for example, which is like one of the most kind of typical Western pop love songs that exists, right? But her accent and some slight like mistakes in the way that she said some of the words and stuff made it so much more enjoyable to listen to than listening to the original. And especially, I know this is me speaking, but especially when they swear, I love it. I love
like an F-bomb being dropped.
Oh yeah, because there's 2 F-bombs in that song, and I still fucking love you. She's sitting there like all happy and just delivers that with the whole chest. It's like that's a big, that's certainly an aspect of the appeal for me personally. But yeah, just the way that it sounds English in a Korean accent is more appealing to me now than the kind of typical Western pop sound where it's even hard to determine whose voice is whose because they're so similar.
Yeah. I think I understand that a little bit, like, because Jisoo in Blackpink, when you're listening, isn't like perfectly pronounced, I would say, comparatively, when you're listening to all of them do something in English, and there is something charming about her parts in English sometimes coming in the song, and the little bit of like difference there. I can get that for sure. I have a question to kind of conclude this with. So what is a song you love so much in K-pop that you wouldn't want to hear an English version and fears that it would like ruin it for you?
Oh man. Wow.
I knew it's a hard one because I thought about it and instantly to my mind came like a Monster from like Red Velvet or like some stuff like that where it's I vibe so much with the way the Korean like rhymes in the verses and everything. It's like if they did just a full English version, it would like ruin it for me probably.
Well, I mean, while I muse over this, I'll say, thinking of English demos of famous K-pop songs where you can kind of picture what that would be like. So for one that you're obviously a fan of is Wavy's Love Talk, right? So like that obviously the English version of that I feel like is more enjoyable to us than the Chinese version.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Not least because we're less accustomed to the sound of Chinese, and in the most respectful way possible, I don't tend to like the sound of Chinese as much because a lot of its syllables are very similar sounding. Lots of sh and chut sounds.
Those English lines in the English version are so good too. in Love Talk. But
then in the demo, you have it's even further. It's just like, I can hear it calling, you sexy fuck, or something like that. It's like, which they recorded that demo, and I'm just like, I can only imagine if they had released
the version we all needed that we didn't get.
And we have like EXO's Monsters English demo has like a really British rap verse in it.
So you've shown me that before. Actually, I remember that.
I've got the paintings on me now. It's like something you'd hear in a UK grime song, which is insane. Or like FFX's Four Walls. The original chorus to that was like, you got me in the friend zone, or something like that. It's like, do you think, obviously, guide and demo versions aren't ever written with serious lyrics to be what a version's lyrics would be. It's just to match the sound and the rhythm and stuff, right? Yeah. But it is hilarious to think of what those could have sounded like if they had English versions.
I do want a version of just Chin Yeol doing that that like British rap in the middle of Monster.
I'd lose my mind. I think that, so the answer I'll go with, I'm sure I can think of other examples over time. Maybe over the next 10 episodes I'll think of a new song each time, but Yukika would be an artist I would never want to see doing English, because city pop as a genre, I feel like it's so immaculately suited to both Korean and Japanese that I can't imagine it working in English like at all. In the same way.
I think a lot of that has to do with like the pacing of it, or has that kind of like, and then if you heard it in English, you're like, because it doesn't pace right, with the beat.
Yeah. Like imagine trying to do like an English version of Plastic Love or something like that. Like it just,
I'm sure it actually like someone.
I'm sure there are covers. Yeah, I feel like the thought of it in my mind just doesn't. It jars. It naturally jars in my head when I'm thinking of what it would sound like. So that's my answer.
I think you like what I was just saying with like Red Velvet. I appreciate the Bad Boy English version after that initial line, but who would ever listen to the English version over the original? Like it's mind blowing to even imagine. Like, and there's so many songs of theirs, particularly. Anyone who doesn't know Red Velvet is like my go-to for K-pop listening. So like Psycho and so many of those, I just don't want English versions of so many of those songs that I love to listen to, because I feel like the rhyme of them is so ingrained, even though I don't understand everything they're saying. Just the rhyme of it, how it rolls, is so ingrained into listening to it.
I do wonder how much of that is simply just the fact that you listen to that one first, and so you become accustomed to it. So, because I'm fairly sure that, because I don't think it's on the upcoming album, but I'm sure they'll release it at some point. I think Twice will release a Korean version of The Fields. I would kind of be shocked if they never do that. And I wonder if when that comes out, if I listen to it, if I like it more or less.
Would be interesting.
If it just because I'm used to the English one now, maybe I don't want the idea of a Korean. And it's like
Loona's Star is like that. Like when I heard the English one first, and then I heard the Korean one, and then I think because I was just already into the whole English version first, where I stick to the English one when I do listen to it.
I mean, so they were both on the same album, and I think I do. Yeah, Star is one of those ones where it's like it's so good. Like the song itself is so good, it's enjoyable no matter what.
Yeah, the bum 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 bum, so catchy.
Yeah, like, and for like us, like synth pop enjoyers, it just like it's perfect. But like, I remember enjoying them both and listening to them both fairly interchangeably. Because I do really like voice as well, and I suppose it helps that that moksori, with the word for voice, is one of my favorite Korean words. I love when it's used, and I think it does work pretty well in both languages. I guess I do prefer the English version slightly, but like I'm perfectly happy with both of those. Whereas sometimes you hear a Korean version of a previously other language song and it doesn't quite hit as much. Like, and this will come up again when we do the Japanese topic, but Twice's Breakthrough, for instance, that's a fantastic song. And they had a Korean version of it, which I was super excited for because I loved that song so much. And then it was kind of underwhelming, and I just kept listening to the Japanese one.
Because it was already really, a perfect world, probably, if they do a Korean version of that. There's something about the way that is in Japanese already where I really enjoy it. I wonder if I would enjoy Korean version of it more or less.
Yeah, or even a full English version of that. Yeah. A big chunk of that song and its hooks and stuff is in English already, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have that just ridiculously catchy post-chorus, like get down, get lost,
Yeah.
Like, so obviously that, well, I would hope to God that they wouldn't change that.
No, if they that's don't touch, when something's so perfect like that, it should be touched, when it already
how
hits.
much would the rest of it change? It'd be interesting to see.
So I do agree with your point, kind of like it can sway you, like which one you heard first, but I think we can all agree that Bad Boy if I heard the English one first and then I heard the opening of the Korean version, I would instantly just be like, this is just better. There's just why? That's all I ever think when I hear that opening line. And the who that is, my brain just literally shuts down once that
Especially
happens.
if you're listening to it blind and you don't know which version it is. So you just hear the start of Bad Boy playing and you're going, oh, good. I get to listen to Bad Boy. What a great song. Mm-hmm. And then who that, and you're there going, who that boy, and then you hear it and you're going, oh no, skip.
Yeah, it always messes with me. The brain is already so drilled in to hear the original line. Yeah, I can't do it. I could, if someone just splices the Korean intro to the English version, I'm sure I could enjoy it much more. But which I'm sure is a thing on YouTube. But I'll always just, the Korean version, the way it rolls already is so perfect to me. I'm happy with it. So it's like, if you're happy with it, then it doesn't matter like how many different. But like when you were saying earlier, where you can interchange with Loona's Star, right, the Korean and the English version, and enjoy both, I would say that's a sign of someone having perfectly done both versions. Like where it's interchangeable, then they've succeeded in just like absolutely nailing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same for me with NCT 127's regular, and both the Korean and English versions are as good as each other. They both have different appeals. And I think and the same with Working Monkey is Cool, to be honest. I don't listen to 100 Facts as much as I probably should, but it's and I think it's definitely going to become a thing that we see more of in the future, that we get increasingly good English versions. Of course, I have to say the English version of Girls, when that eventually will be released at some point officially on streaming platforms. You can check it out on YouTube, but like I feel like it's a really solid English version.
It was, yes.
And managing to keep the right kind of lyrical content that's similar without being a direct translation, keeping the vibe of the song and everything, and having like really hot, like catchy hook parts and stuff as well.
That version was good enough that I am upset that I can't listen to it. Like on Spotify, just easily like click and...
Should have gotten your fan kit to get your USB to...
Hey, I was one of the lucky ones to see an actual like performance of it, though.
True. Okay.
I think that's it for the English versions. Anything that you guys feel we didn't cover about it, always feel free to comment. But yeah, to summarize it, I think if you enjoy one version over the other, I'm not going to shame you for it. Except for if you enjoy English version of Bad Boy more, I will shame you for that. Okay, so topic 2 right now is going to be Elon Musk buying Loona. Let me just say, you've seen it. We've all seen it. All right, we've all seen the Twitter threads. Is that what we would say? I guess it's Twitter threads is basically all I've seen of it. How do you feel about that kind of idea of just like a mega, one of the wealthiest man in the world, I guess, right now, buying Loona?
Well, buying Loona personally, or buying a stake in the company, well, I'll preface this by saying that I don't think it's particularly likely anymore.
No.
But I would be surprised if we don't have at some point in the future some like mega rich guy or girl who decides to buy out a K-pop company, or even just decides to start a K-pop company. We're kind of seeing it sort of with like rich Chinese companies who want to get into the market and stuff, and they kind of buy their way in. So we have
Everglow, an example of that, maybe.
Yeah, so UFO are definitely the biggest one of that. There were Chinese people behind Banana Culture, which was the XID's label, which is most likely now defunct. There's another group, Skyle, who debuted this year to reasonable success in terms of streaming numbers and whatnot. They have a lot of Chinese money behind them. Obviously, China struggles because there's a natural block in the way, but in terms of like the embargoes and the relationships between Korea and China, which kind of stops things from ever reaching huge levels. And I think Koreans, when they find out something is funded by China, they tend to rally against it. I don't necessarily think that would have they'd have the same response to like a wealthy American, or even like, it could be anyone, right? It could be wealthy. I often thought of it in the context of like Premier League football, for example, right? It could be a Russian oligarch. It could be a Saudi Arabian.
Chelsea's owner.
Like, obviously for now, sports teams remain kind of the playground of the mega rich. But in the future, especially as we kind of have the new generation of billionaires, which is a weird thing to think about, maybe there will be some people who express interest in buying out K-pop companies and whatnot. And with BlackBerry and Loona, the kind of money that is being talked about there would be pocket change to someone like Elon Musk. I do wonder if it was something that was talked about seriously, but at least while he was still married to Grimes, because obviously for anyone who's thinking, what the fuck, why would this be relevant, why Elon Musk or whatever, obviously Elon Musk is weird, so there's that. But Grimes obviously did a collaboration with Loona she did Love Forever with YY in their pre-debut stage, and she's always kind of shown a lot of support for them. She said that they wanted working on other collaborations too, but they kept having stuff not work out or whatever. And she's, they regularly have said tweeted out a classic Stan Loona here or there. And a lot of fans, as you said, were petitioning Elon to save them when it became apparent that BlackBerry were having some serious financial issues, which will kind of be the segue into this topic as a whole, which is not going to be entirely about whether or not Elon Musk should buy BlackBerry, but like K-pop company finances in general, how money in K-pop works as best knowledge as we have, and I think we can use BlackBerry as an example. So recently we found out that BlackBerry are massively in debt, and we kind of knew this already because we knew that Loona's debut project was very measurably expensive. The initial figure that they gave was around $4 million, but the actual figure is probably closer to $9 million because they debuted 11 out of the 12 members in subunits after having given all 12 of them solos, which they were filmed in different countries around the world over the span of several years. There's a lot of stuff that went into that process before they released the debut. And
it was such a wild process that we had to do like a full separate deep dive into Loona to like comprehend Loona. It's wild.
And obviously that whole time, while they were releasing stuff that was somewhat, paying gold, going some way to kind of lower the dent, I guess, the overall costs massively outweighed what they were bringing in at that time. And consequently, obviously, as with any business, if your business model that shows you spending money to make money, as it were, that money still has to come from somewhere. So you go into you get investors, right? That's how you do it. You have someone who's going to be willing to give you the capital on the basis that in time they will make that money back plus interest, right? This happens all the time in businesses in any industry, right? So one company that BlackBerry secured investment from is that's actually their second largest shareholder, I believe, is a Japanese company called Donuts, which is a nice name. So they put up, I think, around $3.5 million of investment. So it's a considerable chunk, right? Not the biggest investment ever, but a solid
It's a solid amount of investment money, yeah.
And there were certain things that BlockBerry was stipulated to do in exchange over the period of a couple of years in which they were supposed to then be able to pay this money back. And BlockBerry just didn't do it, just didn't do them. So the investment company went, okay, well, we're going to go for arbitration on this. And BlockBerry tried to appeal and then didn't show up in court for 2 separate appeal meetings. So that was thrown out, and the company was ordered to pay back the full investment to this Japanese company, this happened last year. And I imagine the effects of that, plus naturally COVID and whatnot, which has taken a financial toll on every company pretty much, has resulted in this news that broke a couple months ago, saying that the company is having huge financial problems and owes hundreds of millions of won, if not billions of won, to various different external contractors, including just the staff that they outsource, so like stylists and people like that, who they basically haven't been able to pay. Obviously, the girls themselves don't get paid, but they are given room and board the whole time, right? So that's obviously a cost as well. And yeah, it wasn't looking good for them, and I think it kind of came as a shock because we'd seen, although Loona have gone a long time in comparative terms, a long time between releases, like often 300-ish days or so, sometimes more, between albums. When those albums have released, they've always done well, and they've continued to do more and more in terms of sales. I think the last one sold 100,000 plus. The music videos are streaming into the tens of millions. It's not
Paint
like
the town, right? The town, da, da, da.
Yeah, it's not like they're not selling really well.
Yeah.
And it makes you kind of realize how big that debt is, that in spite of a successful album release like that money is still nowhere near being cleared. And seemingly the only way for them to get around it is for a big chunk of investment to come and save them.
I think that's one of those things when it's not one of like the big, I guess it's big 4 companies now. I was going to say big 3, but I think with Hybe, right?
Yeah,
I think you have to kind of include them into that now, obviously.
Well, I mean, just in terms of pure money, they're above everyone.
I think when it's not one of those big 4 that kind of could totally sponge that, like that, like a 3 million investment, I think, to someone like SM Entertainment or Hybe. Obviously, a lot of money would just be something they could totally sponge. They'd be like, okay, fine, like here's your investment back or something, like easily with the amount of money that they have. But yeah, it's interesting, like with Loona selling well, but then so much debt is still there. Like that's insane to think of, like selling 100,000 copies and then just being like, but we're in debt. Like that's a crazy thing to think about. But yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with maybe like the company itself just not having as good of a money management system as those big 4 companies who are, I'm sure, super rigid and understand money management when they're debuting a group in along like aespa. I'm sure SM, I can't imagine the ungodly amounts of money that they probably spent on that.
And BlockBerry have always been really shady. So BlockBerry was a subsidiary of Polaris. Polaris is a big label in its own right. They used to manage Ladies Coat, and they themselves are under this like conglomerate, and it's called like the Ilgaev Group or something, whose primary source of income is arms dealing. So BlockBerry is actually no longer under this. They're under a separate subsidiary now, which they left. They joined that a couple of years ago, but it's run by the original conglomerate's son. So it's like still obviously
somehow connected in some ways.
In some way, some of that money that Loona started their debut project with was funded with by arms dealing, which is a really bizarre.
That is a very bizarre thing to think about. Yeah, because if there's anything that's gonna keep you afloat, that arms dealing isn't going away.
Yeah, it's still a very profitable business for sure. But so that's kind of the thing. So obviously, Loona's one is an especially expensive example. People say that to debut a group, you're usually going to spend somewhere between $1 and $2 million. All costs considered. I mean, obviously you have like super nugu groups who don't have the full training experiences and they're not put in a dorm. They're just told to live at home, and they don't have that same money going into renting out space and whatnot, and the album production is very low quality. They don't spend a great deal on song writing and production and mixing and all that stuff, but usually those songs don't do well as a result, and they don't have any exposure because they don't have any money to spend on marketing. So it's that's how that works, right? If you want to have any hope of success, you need to be putting out at least 7 figures in terms of US dollar capital. But what's interesting is how K-pop companies haven't always made money in the same way. We've seen, so they all have to release their quarterly reports, right? Quarterly finances, because they're publicly traded companies, right? The privately ones don't have to do this, but the public ones that are on the stock exchange, they do. And we've seen so many quarters go by where they're making losses, and those losses can be ones to tens of millions of dollars.
It's a hard business format because one bad release is just sinking. It's like
the way that, I mean, again, so I'm not going to profess to understand the ins and outs of the financial workings of a company like SM, who has fingers in all kinds of pies, right? They own merchandising companies and subsidiary labels, one of whom is about to have a debut. Mystic Story is about to debut a girl group, so it's somewhere SM is getting some of that money. It's like they're YG has modeling agencies and distribution labels, and there's all kinds of stuff that these companies are involved in beyond just their production of groups. But the way it seems to me is that they lose money consistently. Like if you just left the company running without releasing anything, you would just see its money go down. But then they have a big release and it puts it up, and then it kind of keeps going back down, and they just keep releasing stuff that keeps the overall afloat, but the actual net income is at a loss. Which is a fascinating thing to think of, and you can see why SM, for example, have constantly been embroiled in tax evasion scandals and stuff, and Lisa Man offshoring stuff, and now he's trying to sell. Well, SM is very much likely to be acquired by CJ. CJ, one of the biggest conglomerates in Korea, very much likely to be acquired by them, possibly by the end of this year, maybe into next year. And a deal that's going to be worth over $500 million US or something. But that's actually not that much in the grand scheme of things. That's why we started talking about billionaires, right?
Yeah.
If you have a multi-billionaire like Elon Musk, that kind of acquisition would not be difficult to do.
Yeah,
right?
So and that has a lot to do with like the way that his Tesla and things like that are just always skyrocketing in value. So something like a business like K-pop where he would have a lot of fluctuation like that wouldn't affect someone like his bottom line. But like you said, if their only business is K-pop, that's difficult because that's fluctuating financially so much versus having like something that's really always booming their income for them.
Yeah. And especially with the amount of money that goes into the production of albums and stuff, like you see them selling hundreds of thousands of units, and you're thinking, well, they must be doing super well financially because of this. But you consider the costs of just producing each unit. Like, I wonder what the actual profit margin is per unit per album sold in terms of the packaging and all the stuff that goes into it. Like, it must still be a good chunk, obviously, but
the music video and advertising,
yeah, it's interesting to think about. And I mentioned it already, but with COVID, there's such a big source of revenue was denied in the form of tours and concerts, right? I remember when Girls' Generation did some of their tours. I think they did like 5 different tours around Asia, and they made 100 million from it, something, right? like they're all like some of the highest grossing tours like ever from any group in any music. It's like, you have to imagine if with the way that K-pop has grown, I think maybe to an extent the pandemic helped K-pop grow because it meant that people were spending more time alone at home doing investigations and whatnot. But you have to think once it starts, or now that it is kind of starting to decline, and we're seeing artists announcing tours and stuff, that there's going to be crazy money involved for some of them. People who want to go to shows again, and that'll be a reopening a big revenue source for companies.
A group like BTS is definitely going to have I mean, I'm sure they already have insane numbers from touring, and with how much I've seen the growth, even more of the fan base of that particular group, I can't imagine how much money they're like a world tour BTS is gonna make in the future. You know, it's gonna break some insane number. You know,
I mean, they could go to every city they want and sell the biggest stadium there, right? Like, there's the cost of some of the tickets that are being sold for
Metallica's Black Album tours talked about a lot because they made disgusting amounts of money off of it. Like, and that album, they were able to tour for like 8 years off of it consistently as like the Black Album tour. Was it
Metallica who was the one that did they had like the most stops on any single tour or something like that?
It's something crazy like that.
And haven't they done like they've played on every continent?
Yes, they have done that. Yeah, they did Antarctica. They've played on like every continent. Yes, it's insane. They've been to so many places. Like, I remember they had like an Abu Dhabi show thing and stuff too. It's just they've played.
They were in the first concert after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, dude, they have like
1 million people.
Yeah, it's like 1 million people on an airfield in Russia, and you can't even see the end of it. Like, when that was when they and they open with like Enter Sandman on that, and you're seeing like 1 million people chant that. It's mind-boggling.
That's one of my favorite music stories ever. It's like, so that was because a bunch of Russian people, just normal people, had kind of stood up to the communist hardliners who were trying to prevent who wanted to stage a coup to stop Yeltsin and Gorbachev's like dissolution of the Soviet Union. And like a lot of ordinary people stood up to them, and Yeltsin and Gorbachev said that they wanted to do something to thank the people for this. And they said, "What do you want?" And the people said, "We want a fucking heavy metal concert." And that's what they got. That's how that happened. That's like Metallica and Pantera and people that came.
Yeah, and I believe AC/DC was even like a part of that thing somehow. It's like But, that's pretty sick, actually. At least that's the demand. Like, I want a metal show.
Out of everything, give me metal. But obviously, the thing that sucks and the thing that hurts most is those concerts. There's been a substitute for some of them, right? Which is in the form of like these online on-tact concerts and stuff, which. Mm-hmm. That like crazy like AR technology and stuff, SM has been a big part of developing that. Like they have like a robotics company, because of course they do, that like has developed some of that stuff. But that's a privilege that not every group gets, right?
SM money is definitely a thing.
Smaller groups have struggled because they can't keep that same audience, and while they're trying to, I guess, muster the funds to get a comeback together. That's why we've seen such long hiatuses from groups like Nature and Dream Note, even Meki Meki, Signature, and so on, Luna Solar. It's, even though there's interest, it hasn't been enough to say guarantee them a successful comeback, and they obviously are trying to find a way that whole time, all while COVID is going on, they're having to pay all their staff and keep their members in dorms and stuff, presumably, and just losing money, just hemorrhaging money the whole time, because whatever income they're getting from streaming and stuff is not enough to keep them afloat. You know, you can't keep a company afloat off a 10 million view YouTube video, sadly. And however many Spotify streams or whatever, you know, you're just getting fractions of.
Yeah, you need more like those Blackpink views where it's like, we have 1.1 billion views on this video today. It's like,
or Psy with 4.2 billion. Or whatever it is.
He can just live off of the Gangnam Style views.
Yeah, I mean, and he is in many ways. And that's what sucks. And it's like, I think there's some groups that we're just not going to hear from that have suffered because of COVID. But I guess that kind of goes into the other part of this topic is how can K-pop companies raise money outside of streams and album sales, and why don't they do it more? Why don't they try more routes to secure either business investment or crowdfunding?
Do you think something like Chu, obviously from Loona, is like everywhere? On YouTube, she has her channel, which has exponential growth. It's a big channel on YouTube that Chu can do. It's obviously, I've started watching some of that in the lives, and that's obviously like a big production thing going on. And then I've seen other clips of her being on all kinds of other things that are different channels, different TV oriented things. So do you think that's bringing income? She's doing that to bring income to herself, or is that something that's helping the company income wise?
I in most situations where a company is solvent, and especially where a group has paid off its debt, that would be something that they would certainly have a deal in which the company takes a section of that income. But that hopefully a lot of that would go to her. But yeah, I believe that she hasn't seen us. I would believe that she hasn't seen a cent of it. I personally, I think that because Loona haven't paid off their trainee debt, I don't believe that she would get anything. Even if Blockberry's situation was better, I think that's just kind of how it works. Most contracts will say like, okay, once trainee debt is settled through album sales and streams and whatnot, income, blah, 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 you start getting paid, and you start getting paid like this. For every stream or whatever, the company takes 80% and the artist gets 20%, whatever it might be. And those numbers are different for each company, right? Like those have been revealed before for Big Three. Back then, Big Three, like how much of the slice of each thing each company would offer. So like tour income, a lot more going to the artists rather than to the company, or vice versa. Like individual shoots, like commercials and stuff, a lot more going to the artist rather than the company, or vice versa, whatever it might be. And I think for some of them, seeing more the opportunity for a bigger slice of the pie in some fields might be a factor in choosing a company, if you're in such a privileged position as to have offers from all of them.
Yeah.
So I think, but it's always with that caveat usually of once the trainee debt is settled. Though I know that now at least JYP doesn't make its artists pay their debt anymore. The company just takes that debt and just gradually pays it off themselves with the slices of income from the artists in general, which obviously, how nice that they're in a position where they
they have the financial position to do that. Obviously, a smaller company isn't going to be able to.
Yeah, unless you have a very rich owner. Or some very good investors, and investment comes from everywhere. Like MLD, Momoland's company, they received this investment from an IT firm. I think it was like 4.2 or even $5 million, which is a big investment, right?
Yeah.
And everyone was thinking, oh man, this is going to help Momoland like kind of push back up, like return to being one of the most like exposed and talked about groups in K-pop, and instead they debuted a boy group with it, and like have given a lot to this boy group, and still MMN is still kind of shunted on off to the side, which sucks.
Yeah.
But that money can come from anywhere, and it's, I don't know how on earth that company managed to secure that deal. Like, why this IT company was like, I want to invest in this company, and I'm okay with this random boy group being
that boy group could have been like the contingency of the investment or something, like,
maybe yeah,
like that, like when something gets such a big money investment like that and then it all goes to such a specific thing, you have to think that's what was discussed as part of the investment or something.
But that's crazy to me, just from a business point of view. It's like Momoland had one of the biggest viral hits K-pop has ever seen, in the form of Boom Boom, right? I mean, that video has like 500 million views now. Like, it's no joke. And
that song's just a banger. Like, right. Boom Boom to hit you.
And they had like multiple others afterwards, which were still getting into like the hundreds of millions of views territory because of the success of that. And then like the lack of continued like support financially in the same way from the company meant that their future releases were getting less and less attention, combined with the scandals and members leaving and whatnot. But you have to think that them debuting some boy group wasn't going to have the same potential for financial return, I would think. And so far it hasn't. The Terminator group, as they're known, I think T1419, I think, is their actual name, but we just call them the Terminator group.
It's a designated Terminator.
Yeah, so maybe I think overall the boy group is more profitable, or likely to be more profitable than a girl group is, which is why we see more of them and why they do so well. But yeah, it's interesting.
Kind of on your point with Momoland, I would say something like that situation is down to like not very good management, because okay, you caught fire, you have 500 like million views, this thing's huge, and then unlike the big like 4 labels, they don't know how to like maintain that. Once they got it rolling, they don't know how to keep that rolling. You know what I mean? Like, the main like 4 labels, they know how to be like, okay, perfect, let's do it again, bump, again. Like, they just keep replicating,
keep that growing process. Even
keep growing. And whereas a lot of these other smaller, I'm calling them smaller labels, but they still have a lot of money in a sense, but they don't know how to maintain that status once they got it. It'll catch fire once, and then they don't know how to be like, okay, let's find a second song that we can debut that's going to keep the growth on that level.
Yeah. I mean, well, Bam, I preferred Bam as a song, and it still did really well, but it was like half as popular or something. Yeah. But half as popular is still like in the 200 million.
I remember the like, complaint was that it was too similar or something.
Too similar, yeah. So it's like they wanted to replicate the hit, the same hit, and then it was too samey sounding. I mean,
it was a dope song.
I like it.
I think that's a bit of a ridiculous complaint people have sometimes.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, well, you wanted them to do something really cool like what you already enjoyed, and they replicated that process really well, but then you complain that they replicated it too well or something, It's like, I mean, if you really think about it, was the big major groups like Twice or something, was there not similarities between a lot of the big main releases that they had or something? Could you not have found
I guess similarities between the concepts were as distinct enough that you can separate them by era or what have you. I guess that's it's a criticism that certainly pops up for sure for different groups as well. So I guess the other thing is, when I talked about crowdfunding, it's like it's such stigma in Korea about asking for money. You don't want to be seen as begging in a way, especially if you are ostensibly providing a service to someone. and then asking someone to pay for that service before they have received that service is kind of considered not a no.
Yeah.
It does happen, but I feel like in the West you see it all the time. You will see like a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter or whatever, where it's like, help me reach this goal and we can produce this album and that kind of thing. And it's kind of normal for like indie artists or what have you. And it's just not a thing in Korea. There's been a very few select examples. I know that Dreamcatcher had some crowdfunding before, but especially when you have a fan base that is small but vocal, and they're sitting and they're waiting and will put money into whatever comes up. I feel like if a small company that is, rather than saying just going silent for a year, 2 years and not releasing anything, if they just said, hey guys, we'd love to release more music, but we simply don't have the money for it. Here's a GoFundMe link, and like anything if you can help us reach this target, then we can release something. And if we don't get it, then obviously you get the money back. Like that's how those things work, right? I think a lot of companies could have benefited from doing something like that. A lot of smaller companies could have. I feel like some really good groups and songs potentially have gone to waste because they don't want to. The companies don't want to do that, or
there's like a stigma to it.
Yeah, they feel like it's a shaming or whatever it might be.
I can kind of understand, because crowdfunding, when it comes from like an indie artist, you're thinking, okay, it's going to them. I know exactly what they're going to do with the money. It's for their music. And then you see it kind of happen in that process. Whereas maybe with like a company, and you're thinking in terms of, oh, this is a label, this is a company. There's like all these barriers that you're going through basically. So when you're giving them the money, it's like you're trying to think, how are they going to allocate all these funds that we're giving them? Like, what are they actually going to do with it or whatever? Versus with an indie artist, it's just directly saying like, I'm the artist, give me the money and I make music or whatever. With the label, it's like, but we have these costs and we have these costs over here. And when we have to, you're wondering, where are they going to put all that money specifically?
Yeah. And I guess perhaps the idea that the fan base is international, it's like the company might feel less responsible for it and just think, oh, we've got the money and just take it. What are they going to do? Come over here and storm the building?
Yeah, like, right? Are you going to sue us? Like,
there has been incidences of company CEOs or whatever taking money and running and disappearing. Like that's rare, but it has happened. So I guess that's a factor as well. But it's a shame, and when you can see that there's money going in to a company from the fans and then nothing is coming out, it gets harder to stomach, I think. And those fans are still there willing to pay money because they want to see their group, right?
Yeah.
Like for Nature, for instance, they did this whole thing of vid calls, right? Like you could, which we both did.
Yeah.
You just sign up and pay, and you get to talk to them for a minute or whatever, which is great. It's a nice experience and a good thing to do. And like, I personally spent a good couple hundred on that alone. And I think we worked out that over the course of those different VidCall events, if you worked out every ticket that was sold, because you got told how many, like your slot, and you saw how many people had been sold for each member, we worked out like the cost of all of it together, and it's like 50 grand. So like they took in 50 grand from that. Obviously the company that organized it would have taken a slice of that, but there's a considerable slice of money, right? And then obviously then there were the fan meetings and things as well. And it's like, I hope that overall they came out in the green from that, right?
Of course.
And then it's like, so where does that leave the company? If the issue was a financial one, then how much did this help? And if it was helping,
yeah, you want like financial transparency, like where it's like, okay, what happened with this money, right, or whatever?
Well,
like, where did it go?
Expecting some result from it, especially since those started at the tail end of last year, and now we are in. Oh no, it's the start of this year even.
I personally feel, I don't know if you feel this way, like that a music company, like especially like a K-pop label company, has a responsibility to be more financially transparent, because the support that people are giving is for this group, and they really want to know, like, is the group benefiting from what we're spending? And there's not that transparency of who's benefiting from the spending on that group, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked before about how much it would benefit the people as a whole if the K-pop companies were more transparent about stuff in general. And I think finances are one of those. Obviously, it's a bit different because, you know, unless, like I say, unless you're publicly traded, you're not obligated to reveal that stuff.
Yeah.
So doing so would be a courtesy. And generally speaking, you don't talk about your finances a lot of the time in most cultures. And that's true here as well. You know, you're not supposed to talk about your earnings or your outgoings.
I guess sports teams are kind of a good example, though, where you do kind of see a lot of what's happening financially. It's so public, like, oh, we bought this player for this amount of money. This is like the amount of spending cap that we have. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you see how all their finances are working publicly, you know.
Yeah, and then you can see the results of that when you have, like, what happened with Barcelona, when it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we are €1 billion in debt.
Yeah, and then without Messi, we're awful.
Yeah, and you have PSG who are paying $2 million a week for 3 players in terms of wages,
and their backing, they have insane backing, like money wise, because of the owner.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it would be cool, and it's it might be interesting to know as well for the fans. Just like, I mean, you can guess, you can make estimates, right? You can look at, if you know where a dorm is, for example, you can look at average rent prices, and you can think, okay, so this is how much this dorm will cost overall to rent per year. Okay, this is the average price of living expenses for food and whatnot. So we can conclude that a 5 or 7 or 9 or whatever member group will cost the company this much per year for room and board. Okay, and we say, okay, you can actually look in liner notes for most albums and see pretty much the whole company listed in terms of. So obviously those will have credits for the outsourced company people as well. But if not there, you can go to companies' websites and just see lists of staff. You can see who works there. Everyone from receptionists to CEO, right? If it's a big company or a small company, you can think, okay, what's the average salary for this job?
Yeah.
And let's just assume that that's what they're making. And then you can piece that all together. You can look at the cost for renting or running cars and stuff like that. When, you know, going from schedule to schedule, how much fuel are they expending? Well, you can be as specific about it as you want, and you can come to the conclusion that the company's running cost per year is whatever.
I imagine the managers a lot of the times end up being the drivers, so they don't pay drivers. You know, it's like, okay, we need to cut costs somewhere here. You're driving them around and managing them.
Managers usually are the drivers. You usually have, if you have multiple managers, and you have one who is specifically a driver, or 2, depending on the size of the group. And then you say, okay, so then this is how much money if every album sells roughly at this price. This is the just pure income from album costs. And then this is how much an album costs to produce on average. So this is the net profit. This is how much roughly they earn from streams with the 0.00042 cents per stream or whatever it is. Okay, and then you can kind of try and figure out. So in order for them to have a profit of this amount, say $100,000 or whatever, we would need to buy 13,000 more albums than we did, or something like that. And I'm using arbitrary numbers here, right? But you can try and dig it up like that. But the company could just tell us, and then we would know. And I feel like it would possibly, especially if they were like, these albums, the last ones that we released, each time we were at a loss of like a couple $100,000 or something like that. where if they had sold just a few hundred or 1,000 copies more, then they would have broke even or something like that. That might incentivize more people to buy and support, because I feel like, especially for smaller groups where the package of the album itself isn't quite as rewarding as some of the big group album purchases, people might say, oh yeah, I'm a big fan of this group and I like their music and I listen to it, but I'm not going to buy that album just because it's a simple photo book with like 2 photo cards and not much else, compared to, say, this incredible package from insert big artist here, which I also like, and I love to have this as a collectible. Like, that might incentivize them a bit more to, to help the company, as it were.
I think a big reason they maybe don't do something like that is just because they want their artists to always seem and doing really well, really popular.
Mm-hmm.
And if you release something like that, that then creates breaks an illusion of how big you might think they are versus how big they really are.
Yeah.
And which when it's a smaller group, it's like, tough luck. It's obviously not got the SM backing or something. We have an idea kind of where they are by what, company it is or something, and the amount of money being thrusted into that group. I would say something like aespa, or not aespa, Stacy is who I wanted to say. I'm very interested to see where they go, because they're an interesting group to watch to me, because their label's new, right? And then,
yeah, well, kind of, but it's from a very reputable producing background, right? In the form of Black Eyed Pilsen.
I'm curious how much money has been put into them as a group, and then versus like the amount they're returning and getting.
Because there's actually something about this.
Because they seem to be doing very well, and I wouldn't assume that they had like anywhere near the amount of money spent on them that a major like SM Entertainment or like JYP group has had spent on.
So this might so there's actually like a real thing about this that came out quite recently, which is why it's good that you brought it up. So I had to just drag the article up because I can't remember it off the top of my head. So one of the Black Eyed Pilsen guys was speaking about this, because basically someone said, so Stacey are doing super well, right? Like I think they've sold 200 or even 250,000 albums in total across all their releases or whatever. Like they're streaming super well. They're killing it in Korea as well as internationally. They're getting nominated for all these awards. He's like, okay, so what's the deal? Because they've already been out for a year. We've had 3 releases and everyone has trended. Like, how's it going? Mm-hmm. So they said that it costs around, he said 1.5 billion Korean won to produce one album, which is $1.27 million US, up to about $1.7 million US, including the fees for the music video, clothing, hair, makeup, stage clothing, training, and general upkeep, as well as other fees and stuff. So in order for them to make a good profit margin for each one of those, you need to make 2 to 3 billion Korean won, so 1.7 million to 2.5 million USD or thereabouts. And so because the company is small, they still follow that rule that trainees will get paid once their training and debut debt is paid filled. Off.
Yeah.
So he said that because of the success that they've had, the group is close to breaking even on their trainee debt, but they are still indebted. So, and I don't think any of the Stacey girls, is going down, had many had like huge training periods. I don't think we have anyone who were there for 5 years or whatever. I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it's like at most they were there for a year or 2 at max. So less time of them being.
I guess that just gives you an idea how much is spent in the training period. Because I would have thought with the success already that would have been paid off, like from the success already that they have had. That's crazy to imagine then what someone like Jiho from like JYP's training debt is or something,
Yeah.
Like
I think generally it's not split by member like that. I think it is like they tally up a group total and they split it by the number of members, and that's it. It's not like the members who trained at the company for the least amount of time, like Tui, would have to pay all of Jiho's debt on her own or whatever. Anyway, but
like one member has debt longer or something would be crazy to like imagine.
He reckons it will take 2 more comebacks before they can start earning considerable amounts of money on their own, providing they keep this same course, which I believe they will. I think they're going to continue to get. I think Stacey, if it weren't for aespa's existence and ITZY to an extent, but ITZY have kind of dropped off in Korea lately. Though you still see their faces everywhere, so I can't really say that. But in terms of just chart success on Melon and stuff like that, it's aespa and Stacey, and then kind of weekly as well, following that, for the popularity over here. So I think they're going to be a fixture, a staple. So he reckons the middle of 2022 is when they'll start being able to take some of their own money home.
It's crazy to think about.
But that's so good for a group that's only just debuted,
absolutely.
Right? Like,
I mean, look at the group that's been around as long as Loona, and they are in debt. It's what
to be cleared in that time. I mean, you look at groups that were pretty successful in some ways, but not less so in others. Look at Nine Muses or Fiesta. I mean, Fiesta members have said that they had the whole 7 years, and they never made a dime. They never
7 years of labor and work, and then no payment is just insane to think about.
So obviously back then there were fewer revenue streams available. So it's slightly different story, but I mean, we even said like it was this year. Obviously, it was when Brave Girls got paid for the first time. Obviously, but they had been working for 5 years with nothing. Obviously the companies give them an allowance as well, right? It's not like it's not a prison system where they
but it's not like an actual it's not like an actual income. It's like it's like pocket money. It's survival money.
And it depends on the company, and you sometimes hear people saying, idols saying, what did you buy with your allowance? And one of them will be like, I bought this like designer handbag. So it's like clearly it's more than just $20 to get food with for a whole week. Maybe for some companies it is that bad, but obviously they're being idols, they don't have to be fed as much. So that's probably one thing that companies think, you can have one kimbap piece per day, that's fine. So I think we'll talk about it more in a separate topic, but a revenue source that's opening up is the NFT market, which is met with much controversy. We know that Goran is an expert in this field.
Yes, so we can bring him in to do literally like a breakdown of it for everyone.
Yeah, but we're certainly going to see more and more routes into revenue sources for companies, and we're seeing big companies and small companies alike looking to explore this kind of thing. And I think the advent or success of digital fan meetings and online concerts and stuff, I don't think those are going to go away just because real in-person touring is going to be possible again. I think we're going to see a lot more online events that are ticketed, and people will start capitalizing more on different sources.
Yeah, I mean, it's always moving more digital with everything, so it's just going to keep progressing. I mean, there will be, like VR K-pop concerts, like experiencing it. I can imagine, like aespa in the future, you'll put on a headset in VR and there's like a full thing with the virtual characters. I mean, there's too much potential there for them not to explore it. I guess to kind of conclude this topic, it is, and it's just crazy to imagine, like, I'm sure someone like aespa has already been very close to paying off their debt considering their success that they've had. Like, whatever their trainee debt, I can't imagine they have much left, because aespa, I saw an article not long ago where they sold like a record amount or something of record sales for them, or for a girl group that's that new or something it was.
Yeah, so something crazy.
Yeah, so I imagine when it's that big, like the debt, just Blackpink, there's no way those girls are in debt anymore. There's no way Jennie's in debt as a trainee or anything.
No.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of interesting things that we could cover about this topic. Feel free to drop in the comments anything you feel we didn't cover. We always are free to re-explore something, but I feel that was a good amount that we covered there. Okay, so topic 3 is idols, dating, and then families, kind of, and how that affects the future for them as an idol. Which, for me personally, like that culture, when I first started to understand that idols couldn't like be dating publicly, how it affected their fame and things like that, because that's not so much a concept with Western pop artists. Like I don't think Justin Bieber's fame was affected by him dating Selena Gomez or something like that, you know.
If anything, it helped them, right?
Yeah.
Especially it's a power couple like that.
Yeah.
I guess it's different when it's like someone dating a non-celebrity, but even then, not really. And that often means that person ends up finding ways into the limelight, even becoming mini celebrities in their own right. Mm-hmm. But Western pop media is fascinated by the idea of celebrities dating, and they were constantly trying to find or follow people on dates and whatnot, aren't they? So it's not that different in the same way. And I don't think that Korean media necessarily views it in any different light. I think in many ways it's kind of, like Dispatch, I think is pretty much is chaotic neutral in many ways. I don't feel like they particularly have much personal opinion on it, but they want to get it out and have people read it, right? That's the focus. Yeah. And the way that fans both internationally and in Korea react is just a kind of a fallout that's natural in many ways from seeing news like that break. We talked before about Minhwan and Yulhee from FT Island and Laboom. It's one of the more well-known examples of a kind of intra-industry relationship that went all the way, as it were, and resulted in marriage and children. Because a lot of the other ones we've heard that have gone all that way are an idol and a non-idol, right? Mm-hmm. Or an idol and an actress, or just someone who is not in another idol group, or the same one. That would be especially interesting. So yeah, it tends to be, I guess, easier to preserve your career if you're dating a non-celebrity, and you can keep it more low key.
Yeah.
But what we kind of said before was that we were hoping that it meant that in the future we would see more fans being more accepting of their idols dating, and I think that's becoming true, both for girl group and for boy group. Like when we had Jiho and Kang Daniel, for example, I don't think many Wants or many Danity were particularly upset about it, really. I mean, I'm sure some were, but I don't recall seeing like a large outrage move. I think most people were just kind of like, good for them.
Yeah.
You know, that was pretty much it. With Momo and Heechul, there was more of a backlash because of the age gap.
The age difference, yeah, for sure. I remember seeing a lot of the comments about that, and it's like, they're both consenting adults in the situation, but it's interesting when people get that involved to be in someone else's personal life when you don't personally know them at all.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you disagree with the idea of a large age gap in general, which is fair enough, I suppose, but like, it's a thing in all over the world, but it's definitely a thing here too. A lot of girls don't want to date people who are too close to them in age. They want a large age gap. And I think there is certainly a thing of you have to stop treating idols like they're children and babies forever, and don't infantilize them, and let them, when they are adults, make their own decisions.
Yeah. Especially when they're in their mid-20s. Like
yeah.
Like Momo, I believe, is, or like in her.
I think she's 23, I think.
Oh, okay. So it's still like, very much in control of her own decisions,
Yeah. So we have some other kind of examples. We talked about Taeyang from Big Bang as well, of course. We talked about another YG artist that was announced recently, which is Bobby. So we have Bobby from iKON announced out of absolutely nowhere that he's expecting to be a father and that he's getting married, and everyone was just kind of like, good for you, King. Like,
that's the way you do it. You just drop it out of
yeah, because it was like so quick. It was like then it was like a week or two later. It's just like he's had like his girlfriend has had the kid, and we were like, oh, it was that soon. Huh? Like,
when you hit it that like just out of nowhere, it just doesn't give people time to give you like the hate side of it. It's just like, it's happened. Like,
I mean, it's probably helped in part by the fact that Bobby is such a likable character, right? Like, I don't know many K-pop fans who dislike Bobby, even if they're not fans of iKON, right? But I don't recall seeing any real anger or anything towards him, or any calls for him to leave the group and stuff like that. We talked about the same thing with Chen. There was a very, very small fan movement from XOL trying to call for Chen's movement, and then the counter protest to that was so much larger. They were just like, look at these fucking like 6 idiots like camped outside the SM building demanding Chen leave EXO and stuff. Which
that gives hope,
the way
kind of, to it getting better.
Yeah, I think when you compare that to I mentioned before, the way Sungmin from Suju was treated, very different. Or a couple of guys, actually 2 guys from the same group, UKISS. I think you must have come across UKISS at some point.
I had to have, yeah.
Yeah. This is a second gen boy group. They had 2 members at different times have kids. Not just dating, actually leave, get married, and have kids. Dongho, he was really young. I think he was 21.
Oh, okay, wow.
Or something. And
he had a kid when he was an idol at that age?
Yeah, got married, had a kid. Stopped being an idol because of it, I think. I might be wrong about that. You have to... Someone can correct me. But he actually ended up getting divorced a few years later, but he still looks after the child. And then Eli, another UKISS member, who is my boy, he... he's still married and has a kid and is happy to this day. The group's no longer around, right? And it's certainly like, well, I don't think they're going to be coming back because the members are busy with their children, right? So that's a factor.
So I think the big thing about it is you would hope that people are fans of the artist in the group because of the music, and not because of this weird idea that they are available to date. Like, right? Yeah. Like, that's kind of the factor to it, I guess, is like they want the idol to be, I guess, in the very sense of what it is called, an idol. You want them to be like perfect in every way and available in some crazy way, like you're gonna meet them in the future and then date and marry them,
right?
Kind of thing. Which it's like
that is a way that they are marketed a lot of the time.
Yeah,
right. Like, perhaps more so for boys, maybe, that the idea of the oppa that you could meet type thing. Obviously it varies on concept, but like for groups that debut with a concept of having like a boy or girl next door type vibe, like a real person. Obviously they have real people, you know what I mean? Like they're not presented as being some kind of fairy or monster like some concepts are. It's like there is that appeal for some people, some fans. And then especially when they grow up with them over a long period, I think there's certainly a spot somewhere along that line where if they announce that they're in a relationship, that people get mad about it.
Yeah.
But eventually the fans mature as the idol themselves has grown up to the point that they then want them to date. I think now, for example, with Suju, because Ryo, of course, is now in a relationship, and I think everyone was just happy for him too, even though the way that he and Heechul both revealed their relationships, they were both like very apologetic about it. And that's always the way those statements are worded, right? It's always like, I'm so sorry to disappoint the fans and stuff. And it's like, bruh, yeah.
Their fans are married, like at the or something, right. You know, like
at that point, especially elves, like it's about elves who've been there for 17 years. It's like a lot of them are going to be married with kids by this point.
Yeah.
Maybe their kids might also be fans by this point, like you know. But I think especially with some of them, like Ituk's always been he's had a fair few incidents over the years where people have come out and shown that he's slid into their DMs on Instagram.
I think the Super Junior leader, right? I think I remember one with him and a Momoland member, right, or something.
It's worse than that. He DM'd who he thought was the member, but was actually one of her like fan pages or something. So they were just a fan receiving. Yeah.
Imagine when they saw that blue check mark or whatever, they're like, "What?"
Yeah. So, and obviously, the man is 38 years old. He's looking for love, you know.
Yeah.
And I imagine he wants to. He's not thinking he's gonna have like a quick fling or whatever. Like he wants to settle down, you know. He sure has openly said that he doesn't want to get married. Like he's not looking to get married, and he's happy to date, but not be a long-term thing or whatever.
I mean, he comes across much more of like a playboy kind of dude, you know. He's
right.
Just like...
right. But I think a lot of fans were just kind of like, yeah, like go find your love, Heetuk. Maybe do it in better ways than sliding into random people on Instagram's DMs, but
fan page Instagram. Oh, that's great.
But it's, you know, a lot of idols, they don't have opportunities to meet people as easily, right? So they end up in relationships only with people from within the same industry and stuff, which is a lot harder to manage, not least because of the forced secrecy, but also just because you're super busy all the time. Well,
and then you're recognized everywhere. You can't just be like chilling out at a cafe on a date or something in public, and it's like that's Leetuk, that's the leader of Super Junior or something, you know, like
right.
It's not so simple for them. One interesting thing I wanted to bring up about this, even though we've kind of talked this topic a little bit on another episode. Do you think, like, so we've talked about some of the good scenarios and some of the bad ones. So one I've always been interested in is like the Taeyeon Baekhyun one.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, do you think that one kind of had so much vitriol around it because of who the two people involved both being so famous in it? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think they were both at very strong points in their careers when that happened, right? And I think a lot of the argument, I wasn't hugely invested into the fan side of things at that point in time, so I've only learned about it more retroactively than having experienced it in person. But I gather a lot of it was this whole idea of like, don't ruin your careers while you're at this point or whatever, and the idea that the two of them dating was like career threatening in some way, which I don't feel like it had to be viewed in that way.
Yeah.
And like, to use another example of two super popular group members at like super high points, when Jennie and Kai started dating, I don't feel like there was anywhere near that kind of response. Yeah. Everyone was like, wow, this is the sexiest couple in K-pop, right? Yeah. Like, holy shit, imagine what their kids will look like. That kind of thing.
Like, I don't know how that wasn't the reaction to Taeyeon and Baekhyun. I was
exactly. and I think that shows just how much it has changed over the course of 5 years or so. And I do think that probably more so among international fans that there's less outcry. I think with groups that were as big as as Girls' Generation and EXO are at that time, still are at that time, that it was, it didn't go down very well. The same way that there was outcry about with Tiffany, but people warmed more to it later, you know, and I think people started regretting the way that happened, tearful airport apologies and all, and yeah, I know that there's also people who believe that it was never real and it was a faked relationship done for cameras and just to get publicity for the company in general.
And there's always a theory to like that.
There's got to be a conspiracy in there somewhere, yeah. But so it's tough. But I think perhaps you could even point to those relationships at that time, like Taeyeon Baekhyun, Tiffany Nikian, Kai and Crystal, if that was ever really happened, as like a
wow, Kai's found his way in there two times in a dating.
I mean, bro, if you look like Kai, like there's no way you're not just gonna be, you know.
You think that guy's single? You're out of your mind.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Everything I know about the idol industry is that way more idols are dating than you would think, dating each other and dating other people.
Of course. And some are just way better at hiding it, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, like, if you believe that your idols are virgins, then you are out of your mind.
You put that many people that look that good in a room together and you don't think they're meeting up with each other outside.
They are meeting with good feelings, as the statement would say. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I think we are turned a corner. I think it's still going to be slow, and I think it's still going to be very favored for the men, because there is the obvious effect in terms of having a family, right? There is the Korean cultural thing that the woman is meant to be the one who stays home and the man is the one who earns the money and whatnot. But if the woman wants to have kids and then continue performing, for example, it's much, much harder. Not least just because of the time commitment and stuff, but also having to physically undergo pregnancy makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
So an example is Soyul from Crayon Pop, who is married now to Moon Hee-jun from HOT. And they have one of the most adorable children I think I've ever seen ever in Jam Jam. Who is well, that's like a nickname. So they're on the show Return of Superman, right? Mm-hmm. Which is like show where it just shows like celebrities raising children.
Yeah.
And that kid is just all kinds of ridiculously precious. But she's always kind of shown that she left Crayon Pop, and the Crayon Pop fans were treated her with a lot of animosity. And there was kind of this idea that like she got pregnant and then it was kind of like a shotgun wedding type deal. It was like she's pregnant, so now she has to go get married and leave the group, and it was all kind of done like that. And that's kind of the stigma that's followed her since. And she went on the show Miss Back to go and perform again, go on stage and record songs and sing and dance and all of that again, and looks incredible doing it, and didn't look like she'd been away. And you know, while that kind of stuff didn't necessarily take off for her, and she still prioritizes being a mum, as you would expect, I think the door perhaps is more open for females idols who want to have kids and still be performers, to do both where their schedule allows, but doing so within the tightly regimented scheduling of a girl group is probably not possible. So unless it's like a much older one who just will reunite for whatever. Yeah. I mean, like we saw Kahi from After School, right? The MMTG, like.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Kahi, like age 40, like looking incredible.
Still performing like perfectly too. It's like.
And I think it was Becca who was pregnant, like at the time, like a good couple months pregnant, and like just doing that whole performance with a kid in there, like you know. So it's not something that they themselves will want to do all that often, I would imagine, but it's certainly something that is possible. And I personally think it would be really dope if we, like, it kind of follows on with the 7-year curse topic that we talked about before, that like when groups get older and they go into later stages of their careers and they want to stay together and keep doing music together, that they can be, if they're releasing one thing a year, then that can be something they can manage alongside having a family, you know. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Or they can just sit something out because they're 7 months pregnant or whatever it might be.
Well, for sure. Like, I imagine, like, if I, imagine James Hetfield from Metallica, because he has a family, and then he has a family, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just not gonna listen to Metallica anymore because now you do have a family. So it's like, to conclude things, I feel like the culture is changing around the dating idol thing slowly. Like we said, it's slowly changing, but it's definitely getting better. And hopefully in the future I can see something like a girls' generation in their 40s as like moms, or performing still, like G and everything, just being dope still, like without any stigma to it or anything.
You have to imagine, right? Because having kids even in your 30s is considered late to have kids. A lot of the time, and in a lot of societies. I know that in Korea it's more of a thing nowadays to have kids later. But like, you have to think, if girls' generation, who I think they're in the kind of 31 through 33 age range at the moment. If they're going to start having children, it's probably going to be within the next 5 or so years.
Yeah.
Right.
And who cares if they do or don't want to? But it's like, if some of the members that have kids or whatever, I would just hope that doesn't mean like they are not part of girls' generation anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just like, why does that matter?
Well,
like,
yes, I have my eyes on Soo Young because she's had a boyfriend for 5 or 6 years now, I think. That actor guy whose name I don't know. So you have to think at some point maybe one of them will, but I think that even then they're still faced with the thought that like, oh, if I have a kid, I'm not going to be able to do the acting and stuff that I'm doing. Yeah. And like it's going to be a detriment to their career, at least for a time, just through the physical process of having a child. Unfortunately, it essentially equates to a year's hiatus for no matter what, just through the physical and like follow-up results of it, which is an unfortunate biological thing, mostly, not aided by societal things. But yeah, I hope that we will see more of it. And I also hope that we don't see the men who have had kids recently not come back, like not when Chen didn't come back for Don't Fight the Feeling. I think it was like really, I mean, I don't know when it was recorded, but I know that the release was really close to when his kid was born, so I get that, obviously.
Yeah.
But it would be a real shame to never see him do anything with EXO again. Just because he's even though he's officially still a member or whatever, but he just doesn't, it's just not there. I think that would really suck, not least because he's freaking Chen. But the same going for Bobby as well, of course. And then, so I hope that we see more. I hope we see those guys coming back to their groups when they're able. And I hope that we can see women when they go through into the less regimented girl group scheduling period, can have kids. Or at least even thinking... Maybe some of them think when they come to that 7-year contract deadline, they go, I want to start a family. And they choose not to renew because of that, but have the option to do both and realize that it's workable.
Me and Oliver are basically saying, let moms and dads be idols, okay? Let it happen. Let us have our mommy and daddy idol groups.
Yeah, when me and IU eventually have children, I hope that it doesn't stop her being a singer, basically.
Okay, it's just ridiculous to imagine someone as good as IU, Taeyeon, and Sunmi for their careers and awesome music to be derailed by something like having a family.
Yeah.
In conclusion, sure. let mommies and daddies be idols, okay?
Yes.
Stop ruining this for everyone. Whoever this small niche of angry people in the fandom, stop it. That's all we're asking for. All right, well, that has been it for episode 5 of this podcast. I hope you all had a good time. I know we did, and feel free, anything about the topics, any discussions that you guys want to have, to leave that in the comments below. I'm Honan.
I'm Oliver.
See you all later.